it's in the breaking we come unbound. And it's in the giving we are found. Yeah, you could barely change.
Welcome to A Medicinal Mind, Wisdom and Wellbeing, a podcast dedicated to the telling of authentic stories and the sharing of insightful wisdom, exploring science and spirituality, medicine and Mother Nature. No topic is off limits when it comes to growing our personal understanding and supporting our collective well-being. With your host, Dr. Rob Abbott, a family medicine resident practicing spiritually focused and evolutionarily informed functional medicine, we hope to nourish your being so that you can flourish in whatever the moment has called for you to do.
And I know you tried.
In episode 55 of A Medicinal Mind, Wisdom and Wellbeing, I have one of the most beautifully intense and inspiring conversations with one of the top sports performance and rehabilitation specialists in the field, my close friend, Scott Dolly. Scott completed a master's degree in athletic training at Shenandoah University in Winchester, Virginia, and subsequently went on to become founder and CEO of Evolution Human Performance and Rehabilitation, his playground for sharing and living out his passions for life, training, practicing, and growth. Starting with an exploration of Scott's early life, we get a clear picture of the deep spirituality and intuition that was being cultivated long before his pursuit of sports performance and rehabilitation. We then move to discussion of Scott's methodical approach, illustrating, rather poetically, the inclusivity of his therapeutic techniques, outlining how he combines his empathetic nature, pattern recognition, and a deep understanding of biomechanics and physiology to help individuals achieve optimal performance or rehab from challenging injuries. Seeking to dispel the negativity attached to consistent judgment and labeling, Scott opens our eyes to see that as healers, we should not define ourselves simply by our formal training, and we should consistently seek further education as part of a greater exploration of ways to support healing. Getting more specific, Scott begins an exploration of his manual techniques, defining and describing biomechanics, myofascial disturbance, and the use of instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization, or IASTM. Providing concrete clinical examples, Scott illustrates how his manual therapies must be combined with optimal nutrition and lifestyle habits in order to facilitate healing or improved performance. Expressing his humility, Scott shares his evolution as a healer, outlining the changes in his nutritional and manual approaches, echoing the importance of continual and iterative improvement. Expanding into some of the biggest challenges facing the health of our broad society, Scott offers his opinions on what he sees as the biggest barriers and drivers to dysfunction and illness. Getting practical, Scott leads us through what he calls honoring the simplicity of movement, asking us to simply start moving our bodies through the breadth of angles and loads for which it was designed. We close the conversation with a poignant exploration of the purpose of training and the desire to become more aware and mindful of our athletic pursuits. There was so much in this discussion, and I'm really grateful to have crossed paths with Scott during my time in Winchester, Virginia. And I'm so grateful to continue my friendship with such a dynamic healer. And with that, let's dig into the show. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. This is probably going to be one of the most intense podcasts, just from the energies involved and the passions involved. You have so much to share. So just giving a disclaimer to people who are about to listen to this. This is going to be intense in a good way. So thank you for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Rob, for having me on. It's great meeting you. And I was honored to get the invite, and I definitely look forward to this podcast and getting into health, healing, and wellness for people.
Yeah, man. So before, this is something I've started to do, really recently, is before I even get into like who you are and what your job is, what that description is, before I can get people's minds warped into a bias about who you are, I've really started these podcasts, like getting a sense of, let's take some time and go back in time, so to speak, and to your childhood, and more specifically to your spiritual background, or perhaps, lack thereof, depending on what it was like for you. But what was that like for you as a child growing up?
As a child growing up, I think it's interesting, for you to use the word spiritual background. I would kind of agree with that. Like most people, when you say spiritual, they automatically think religion. So I didn't grow up in a religious family. We didn't go to church. It wasn't a Christian family, but there was always a deeper sense of connection of good, so it's, my spiritual background as a child it's very interesting. Like I was always very meditative. I remember when I look back on my childhood, looking at Kung Fu stuff, looking at Tibetan monks meditating, looking at Native American ceremonies. For whatever reason, I was always very drawn to that. Like I remember meditating in elementary school with nobody telling me to meditate, but just sitting in meditation. I grew up very poor in West Virginia in a trailer park. So I've just always had this spiritual calling since as long as I can remember. It's always been in there.
Wow, man. When I was in elementary school, I don't think I stopped for a second to be able to even attempt to meditate. I was the kid that, like, in first, second, third grade, I had to have, like a chart recording my behavior because I was just so high energy. And the teachers knew it too. I had to go run like extra laps, which I enjoyed, but out of recess, and go run to the flagpole a couple more times to get some of that energy out. But
well, I was still that kid. No, I was like building dojos in the woods, like real little fort dojos, and actually sitting and meditating in them. So I would I've spent time as an adult, as I got into transcendental meditation, all the meditation I do these days, just thinking about like, wow, I've honestly always kind of been like this. There's always been a thing there that really drew me to something deeper than myself and this world we kind of live in. So yeah, it's kind of always been in there.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a point too, is that these experiences, while maybe it takes until adulthood to learn about transcendental meditation or insert whatever other practice, it's almost like an innate, inherent part of being a child. And you don't know the name of it. Like you said, you didn't know you were meditating. You didn't, no one gave you a label to put on it, but it was just, that was what that moment was like for you. I don't know. It's just something when I start to observe more, I work in or volunteer at a church with youth ministry, with elementary age kids. And just witnessing and observing them, you start to see in some of the things that they say, they don't have terminology for some of it. It's just what they do. And there's just something I see as like an innate, inherent part of us as children that maybe gets taught out of us, which is maybe something we'll actually talk about today, and the scope of how we move and some other things. But was curious, was there anything within that childhood, within that sort of scope, that particularly formative people? It sounds like you have a very unique background, probably challenging background, but anything within there that's kind of was extremely formative that led you down a very unique path, I would say?
I don't know. I mean, I think you would have to get into my adolescent years, right? Where I started, experimenting with plant medicines and a deeper sense of connection to the earth. That's where I really started really sensing and then getting into yoga and meditation. So really when it started to become defined, right? When I found out what Zen Buddhism was, when I found out what yoga was, I remember when I saw my first singing bowl, which is vibrational medicine, I was just like, I bought 3 singing bowls before I ever truly knew what they were. I was just drawn to them, right? It's really hard to just say like, why do you like this color? Or why are you into those things? Sometimes you're just like, I don't know, I just like them. Well, then later on you learn kind of like, oh, now I see why I like those things. So, in my adolescent years, it was some plant medicines and some really great experiences with some great people that showed me more of a deeper sense of connection to this earth and the planet and a bigger consciousness that we're all part of that really started to shape, me as a healer. When you look at Qigong practice, I started Qigong practice all around the same time. So I've been practicing Qigong and yoga meditation for almost 20 years now, 19 years. Right. So,
Wow.
it's been a long time. It's something that I just continually draw from. It's like a well that I can go back to, and keep pulling energy from. And it's, wanting to help other people connect to that well is definitely part of my physical rehabilitation work. It's just not really said or discussed, but it's all part of my mannerisms and making it, it's all in there. It's definitely all in there. Um, yeah. When I was like, you want me to get onto an influential figure or something, or?
Not necessarily. I could certainly. So what you just said. I mean, you kind of. I'm sort of going to lead into this, but you've already really brought it up. You used the term healer, and I mean, I know you, and we're not like super awesome friends because we just sort of got to know each other recently, but know you pretty well to sort of know your background. But you use that term healer, and you also alluded to, the fact that you're sort of focus on the body in certain aspects. But this is exactly why, from the other aspects of what you said to that answer, put in that answer, this is exactly why I start here, is because what you just provided was a huge, well in depth of your approach, so far beyond, and we'll just get into this, than just treating the body or doing some kind of manipulation, which you just expressed. And I'd love for you to kind of reflect, back on me and share with us your personal view of this. But I mean, it's so much more than just giving someone an herbal supplement or giving somebody a massage or whatever, pick your modality. There's a huge depth to your work, and you use that, term healer. So I really just wanted to get your thoughts on, why you use that term, or how would you even describe yourself in this broader scope of what you do?
It's a great question. It's very difficult, even when you look at building a business in this world and actually defining a product. So much of how I've defined myself is to undefine myself. Some of my restrictions are based on my certifications. Some of the things that make me vulnerable are based on how I define myself. So when you just, come back to ultimately, what are we all doing? We're healers. What are you doing when you truly heal somebody? If your back hurts, do you feel mentally okay? And then, it really is a holistic approach of healing somebody on all fronts of where that physical, if it's physical pain causing mental pain, or if it's mental pain causing physical pain, and there's such a level of healing and calm that can come to the body if you can just get them connected to themselves and connected to their current on the earth. Everyone who knows what it's like to feel themselves, you're like, now I'm just feeling good today. I'm feeling grounded. I'm feeling connected. And then so much gets you out of that place that there's a lot of healing to be done just by getting people more connected and grounded with themselves, out of their heads, out of their fears, and just into really what's going on inside of them. I think there's a lot of healing, to be had there. So that's definitely a deeper, part of what I do with people.
I mean, in a very practical sense, when people are coming into your room, there's not really much else they can do or any place else they can go, right? You sort of have them captive for those moments, especially if they're on their table or in some kind of position that they're vulnerable in, a physical vulnerability, let alone an emotional vulnerability. I know for myself, having gone up and worked with you and been that sort of wore the patient badge and was sitting there on the table and being put in these positions, and as we were even talking and discussing, it was just you can't help but be drawn into that space. And then the energy that you bring to it, right, is just so therapeutic. And while you can have an intensity about it, where it's coming from, the intention is strictly like you just said. It's like, I want to not only realign this myofascial disruption, I want to bring your mind into this moment. So you stop worrying about some garbage that you don't need to be worrying about right now.
Oh, you're dead on. It's amazing the stresses that I've seen people, especially chronic back pain, chronic shoulder pain. A simple drill for our listeners is like, if you this is easy, this is on the surface, but it'll let you see how things are affecting you. Everybody gets tense during like a thriller movie or a scary movie. Just if you catch yourself sitting with your shoulders higher and you're in this weird position because you're feeling tension, those same sort of minute energy tensions reside in your life of things that are stressing you all the time. So a lot of times when I'm working on somebody's back, I'm having conversations about their life, and I'm actually getting rid of the tension on multiple domains of their body and mind. And, it's all at the same time, I'm making them laugh about things. Laughter is such good medicine, man. I laugh a lot with my patients.
Yeah. I mean, we were probably laughing half the time we were talking about just sharing different stories. And I mean, I know, and maybe this is kind of another question I want to kind of get into is, when I went in, some of this is like obviously selfish coming from my personal experience, but I came in to you and can't really say I had like a pain. I was very upfront with you. I was like, I don't really have something I can think of that I need to work on. And you started to sort of kind of do your thing. You just started observing. For me in my world, I see like I don't feel pain, so there's nothing really going on wrong, right? And you do a few things, and it's suddenly like, wow, we've tapped into a whole other domain. And what was going on in my life at that time was actually probably was playing a bigger role than I really thought, what I was cognitively aware of. And that wouldn't have been elucidated unless there was this combination of kind of being in this space, manipulating your body and talking through things. And I know, like I said, this is my personal experience, but you've worked with a number of people with numerous issues and helping them to get in touch with themselves, because we as sort of that patient, and I use that sort of label, we're stuck with the pain, or we're saying our minds are stuck with either, we only use pain as our barometer. But for you, the depth of what you're doing is so much more. Like if you're simply going off pain, like that's one tiny little piece of information. So wanted to give you some space to maybe share, like, how are you going about evaluating an individual from, both a mental perspective, but also on their body, because it's got to be more than just like my knee hurts.
Yeah, it's one of my partner in life and in business, and the vice president of our company, Julie. She's said several times, it's just amazing to hear people after I work with them, and she goes, how do you end up getting into all those spaces? And I said, their knee pain is just what brought them to me, right? So it's when I was just to kind of catch up, because it'll really help answer this question. If people out there have heard of empaths and intuitives, and we all create those labels like they're mystics. We're all empathic and we're all intuitive. It's just a matter if you can quiet your mind enough to not let the distract. It's not that some of us have special powers. It's just that some of us can push out the rest of the junk to listen to our own empathic nature and intuitive nature. Everybody is empathic and intuitive. You just got to be able to quiet yourself and feel that. And when I was about 20, and I used to play in drum circles and had singing bowls, and I've been a Reiki master I've been a master practitioner for 13 years now at a master level. And I was setting my singing bowls up one day at this little drum circle thing, and this woman came over to me, and she was about 50 or something. She said, "Young man," this is how she started the conversation. She said, "Young man, do you know how much of an empath you are?" And I was like, I said, no. I said, what's an empath? I didn't know. I like the singing bowls. And that woman, fast forward, became my Reiki master. And I really studied under her for about 3 years on empathic abilities, intuitive abilities, how to quiet your mind, so it's hard to just non-egotistically speaking, just objectively, I'm a pretty strong empath. I can feel people. I can really feel and see and get into those deeper levels. So my analysis starts with somebody. As soon as I start looking at them or feeling their vibe, I can really just sense deeper things that are going on in there. And that's one of the, some of the questions about where I'm at in my life and teaching. It's one of the most challenging things to teach. Like I can show technique, I can show positions, I can tell you how to watch for a knee coming in, but how to become intuitive and empathic is like this self journey that you can almost only provide experiences in a setting for people to find it within themselves. So I can point out nuances. If I could just because I've thought about it, if I could, show if you videoed me from start to finish, and we've talked about this in-house, I could go back and watch that video and probably start showing people the little mannerisms or tone of voice or eye twitch or agitation. And I'm just on it. Like my brain, I'm really good at critical thinking and pattern recognition. My brain's always done that since I was in kindergarten. I was told I was gifted, blah, 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 but I've just really been good at pattern recognition. So I just, now this many years and this many patients later, people's pain patterns emotionally and physically, I have a lot of experience looking at that, so when I can now, if you tell me one thing, I can almost extrapolate 3 different possibilities, and people's like, wow, you do it so quickly. I'm like, I could teach you how to do it so quickly, but it's, I can do it so quickly because of all the experience of what I've seen of those pattern recognitions from a deeper empathic, intuitive thing. But I'm a scientist. This isn't woo-woo stuff. So it's always going to be very, I'm always double, triple, quadruple checking myself in a visit. I'm always willing to be wrong. And I think that's one of the things that helps me help people so much is I'm always willing to be wrong. And I continually check myself to be up. Like I found it going that way. Okay. We come this way. I found it again going this way. I'll purposely forget that I'll try to forget where a pain spot was and go back in and see if I can find it again. And I found it 5 times, or I will see that if the conversation starts to go somewhere and you start to be more tense, now my palpation that didn't hurt a second ago hurts now. Now I can see that there's an emotional cause to some of that pain because I took the conversation somewhere else and now pain increased in you. Right. So now I'll actually deal with that so on both ends, it's a very dynamic thing and I'm just doing it. So it's really, like I said, I look forward to conversations like this at this part of my career because it helps me formulate what I'm doing because I'm just in there doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, if I really am going to back my way out of this and try to create an archetype for people to follow, what exactly am I doing? But it's all of that. It really is, pattern recognition and concomitant things going on at once. And how's one affecting the other? Is this person connected in themselves, or are they in a series of disbeliefs and illusions in their head? I think one of the greatest things I'm able to do for people is I compartmentalize things. So people will come in and they will have 4 different things going on, and they only think it's one thing. So when I can take that one thing, which is 100% of what they have wrong, and I can break it down into 4 things that are now only 25%, and I can show them how to easily manage 3 of the things that are 25%, they are instantly left with only 25% of the problem they had when they came in. And the relief is astounding every time. They're like, oh my God, this is so manageable. Wow, I have my head wrapped around this so good right now. Thank you so much. And I'm like, this is simple, this is simple, this is simple. This we're going to have to work with a little bit. Here's the real pathology. But when you get this out of the way, I just improved your quality of life 75%. And it works. But I got to get through all that. I got to find all those. I got to be able to find the percentages to help them compartmentalize it and wrap their head around it.
Man, there's so many things I want to reflect back at you. I mean, the first thing with that is a great example of, right, the person comes in and an all or nothing mentality. It's 100% this. So if I don't leave with anything of that being addressed, then I'm not helped. But what you just did, is you basically broke down these things into sort of small compartmentalized components based on your diagnostic approach, and then you were able to give them actionable things and be honest about hey, well, this thing over here, we probably going to need some more work on this. But if you didn't do that, right, they would still leave with that one. I have one thing. This is all this one thing, and it's still there. So none of this worked, and then they get in a negative spiral. And they're not going to do the exercise. They're not going to do anything that you told them to do.
Yeah, and so I've been able to help medically. It's one of the things that needs work in our system. Is I've been able to help big conditions and pathologies because as soon as it's labeled as a neuropathy, or as soon as it's labeled cerebral palsy or cystic fibrosis, or as soon as it's labeled this big thing, multiple sclerosis, then all peripheral symptoms that can be umbrellaed under that diagnosis,
yes,
they say you can't help. And I'm like, well, do you mind if I try? Yeah. Right? Because I'm a cash-based practice. I don't need your approval. I'm going to go ahead and try because I'm a healer. I want to help people. And now I really, at a certain point when I slow down, I really want to create a bunch of PowerPoints of all my cases and some of my success stories because it's amazing. The stuff that you can help, it's a peripheral symptom. It's something that the limb may have been made worse by the bigger pathology, but 60% of the pain is peripheral and we can do something about it. You just don't write it off as there's nothing to do because it falls under this bigger umbrella. So that's another thing that I do is just I'm willing to try to see if there's parts of it that we can help. I just don't write them off because.
Yeah. It's so wonderful. Scott, you alluded to, and you use that term, right? This label. And it's something we've avoided doing so far. And we're almost, how many minutes in this podcast? We still, you've used the term healer. People are probably still listening to this what in the heck is this guy? What was his training? And we haven't put that label on you yet, right? And it's still this sort of, and I'm probably going to push you in this direction of well, what exactly are you doing in your room? But we get so caught up, right, with these labels of well, this is that person, this is what I do, he's an expert in blah, blah, blah. Or we find, as you were saying, find a symptom, we're given a diagnosis, and if it has any reasonable ability to fit under that umbrella, we stick it on there and then we don't address it. And we do know, and this is how I think why you're such a beautiful practitioner, is you can take the 30,000 foot view, you can see the functional perspective, and you can see the interrelations, but you can also go and say, okay, I see that this fits under maybe this systemic concern, But I'm not just going to say, oh, it's just because of that, not do anything about it. You're going to go to the periphery and find something that you can work on. And then guess what? Oh, with that communication, fixing something in the periphery can then now reinform something maybe centrally that then helps itself. And so I don't know, I see that as an incredible viewpoint because we're sort of stuck in the traditional model being very reductionistic, or even in a functional model saying that symptoms don't matter. And it's like, well, actually, this can be something, as you were saying, if you put it in the right context and you see what the right lens can inform an approach. So I know there's a lot there, but really wanted to give you some opportunity to kind of share with people maybe some of more of the formality of what your background is and what the heck, if I'm a patient going to Scott Dolly right now in his room, what the heck is he doing to me? Because I still don't really know.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's so when you look at everything that I have studied, I started with an energy worker kind of background and very much in that realm of vibrational medicine, energy work. And then this is almost 20 years ago. And then I got to the point where I just realized that, if you break an arm and the bone is sticking out of it, you might need some plates and screws in that, right? Like there is a, we all like to kind of bash the system sometimes, but there's a lot of merit to this Western world of medicine that we've created. We're all trying to improve it, but there's some solid science and good medicine here, like plates and screws if your femur's sticking out of your leg.
Yes.
Yeah. We didn't used to have that. That's a great thing. So then I started really diving into the human body. So I have my undergraduate studies are in biology and chemistry. I did a year's work on my doctorate of physical therapy and then started backpedaling. When I really got to see what we do as physical therapy in this system, it was one of those, like I'm spending the money. I'm 30 grand and a year into my doctorate, starting to backpedal going like, man, I'm not feeling this. Like, I don't know if this is really what it looks like. And took a couple years off. And then I discovered, and I've injured myself a lot, as an athlete. So my own personal story is I've had 8 surgeries. And I have rehabbed back to, I'm in whatever the standards are for your age group. I'm always in the top 5% of my standards, and I've ruptured both of my Achilles, and we don't need to get it. I have a lot of orthopedic surgeries in my history that I've rehabbed from 100%. And that's taught me a lot myself, is healing myself. But when you look at then, so why I brought that up real quick is because when I took myself out of I removed myself from a doctorate of physical therapy program, took a couple of years off, worked in the outdoor industry, I ended up rupturing my Achilles tendon, and I was going through the process of healing, or going through the process of having the surgery and everything. And the surgeon knew me from before, and he goes, "Hey, we have a student here, Scott. Like, do you mind if he comes in and does the eval on you?" Because that was a classic case. I ruptured my Achilles, and I'm like, "Man, I don't care. Have him come in, see if he can figure it out."
Yeah.
And that really touched me again. I was like, "Man, I really liked that." What I'm saying? Like the healer in me was like, no, that's really what my calling was. But to put the title and label in the box of physical therapy on it wasn't it. So then I found what athletic training was. And instantly I'm looking at athletic training going, well, that's not it either. But I think that's a more solid foundation that I could branch out from. I saw it. So I went to the interview for my master's in athletic training saying I have no interest in being a traditional athletic trainer. There was this new part, emerging practices. And I sat there in an interview saying, I don't want to be in traditional, but I love these emerging practices. I love what I'm reading about this. And I was fortunate. Shenandoah University has the number one at the time. It's always ranked 1 through 3, but it was the number one athletic training program in the whole country. It's a 70 credit master's, full dissection, cadaver lab, 20 months of clinical observation. It's a great program. So they're all over the cutting edge and the forefront of athletic training as an emerging practice. So I walked into the right place with this whole concept of where I wanted to take it, and they welcomed me with open arms. I had such a great experience in that program. I always speak very highly of them in that program. So my medical degree, a lot of this is a whole conversation right here. What an athletic like I lecture at medical conferences to doctors, and I have tattoos, and they do what they do. They go, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. Well, what do you do? I do physical rehabilitation. I do pattern recognition. I'm an advanced manual therapy practitioner. I teach, instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization. Okay. But I'm like, how is that not what I do? They're digging. They're digging for a label. I go, oh, you mean what did I go to school for?
Yeah.
People, we have to stop defining ourselves by what the hell you studied when you were in school. If you're still defining yourself as that, you have not grown much as a healer or a practitioner. So just, people ask me, do you support chiropractic care? I'm like, well, some are good and some aren't. That's like asking me if I support white people. It's like, well, seriously, it's like, what are we talking about here? So they'll try to say, oh, you're an athletic trainer. And then now they can put me in a box.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, you just paid $500 today to hear this athletic trainer teach you some things. So it's up to you whether you want to put me in a box or not, man. Like,
yeah.
So I really played difficult on that a little bit just to try to help. Right? I don't like being difficult, but I think people need to understand you are not what you went to school for. That was just one of the things that you studied. And I have studied, this is my passion, man. I've studied so much about healing the human body and how to optimize it and how to rehab it. And from all different, like do no harm. So if you can, I've studied different meridians. I've looked at acupuncture, dry needling, eye stem, Ayurvedic medicine, athletic training, physical therapy, chiropractic care, manual therapy, physical medicines, internal medicine, nutrition, it's the human body. I lectured this year with Dr. Georgia Eid and Dr. Pavel Klein. Dr. Georgia Eid's a Harvard research scientist. Dr. Pavel Klein's an NIH research scientist. And I lectured on concomitant inflammation cycles in the body. So if you have a systemic inflammation going on from, say, a sugar intolerance or leaky gut, and you have this big autoimmune inflammation and you have a sprained ankle or a torn meniscus, we have a much more complicated case to deal with.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I have case studies. I have several local people that once I got their nutrition under control, their plantar fat, and it still took the clinical work. That's why it's an integrative approach. Like, it wasn't that we got the diet under control and then the peripheral symptoms went away of the acute inflammation. But what I have found anecdotally in my clinic is that if you have a bigger underlying inflammation cycle going on globally, you will suffer from tendinitises and these acute itises much longer, because the system is constantly feeding inflammation that isn't coming from the actual musculoskeletal things that are going on. So that's where you got to really look into both of it. So I really, those are the things that I've studied. So when people come to see me, they're going to get, I'm known for my manual skills. So manual therapy, instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization is the use of surgical stainless steel tools to kind of scrape along the skin to pull out adhesions in the fascia and the interstitium and get the muscles unstuck from one another. Every muscle is supposed to have an exact angle on its attachment site. So when I pull on a rope and it's attached to something, it should pull that thing in the direction that I'm tugging it on. Well, if that rope is stuck to something 4 inches to the side of it, when I pull on that rope, it's not going to tug the thing on the end of it in the direction it's supposed to. If you understand that, you understand biomechanics of the human body. So you have to get all the troughs and everything. The muscles just need to articulate the actual force vector they're supposed to. So I restore biomechanical movement. As I'm getting blood flow and everything restored in the body, you could also say that I'm opening up chi and meridian flow, because we found in a lot of research that actual chi is being thought to flow through our main arteries and nerves. And that's some cool new research that's happening. They actually did some research where they studied Tai Chi masters, and their nerve diameter was greater than the average person on almost all of them, that said that they could study them in their bodies after death. So that just from, so it's just interesting, if you get into the level of it we're talking about. So, then you look at movement and, blood flow and oxygen flow and nutrient delivery into those actual places. They can heal now, right? So then but if you're not putting the right food in your body, then what nutrients are we delivering? Now that I have the roadways open and oxygen and nutrients can come in, what nutrients are you putting in your body? Like, I've ruptured both my Achilles tendons. My diet was dialed after that. Full of what? Full of the things my body needed to build an Achilles tendon. Yes. That's what it needed.
Yes.
Right? So that as I'm opening blood flow and stuff up, here are the building blocks of what my body needs to heal that specific structure. So that, I could keep going, but there's a breadth, at least, not to get too far ahead of people's listening or you commenting. That's kind of some stuff they'll get when they work with me.
So if you are listening, I please hope you still are. That last segment was just a beautiful articulation of, I think, it's still even a bit reductionistic, but still a beautiful articulation of what you're doing for people. And love the fact, like you said, I mean, I was just sitting there laughing, right? They're trying to get that label out from you to say, who the heck is, teaching me? Like, well, guess what? It's your money loss if you thought you're, coming to see whatever. But we get stuck on these labels. What you just said is like, what I went to school for is not who I am, right? You knew, this, broader scope. And I just talked to a physician last week who just released a book, and he's been, practicing for 47, 48 years. And he's kind of acquired the label, so to speak, of a expert in chronic sort of environmental illness and mold. But his depth of his background is just as diverse as he sees himself as a healer, and the things that he's doing for people in any given situation are so diverse. And he recognizes that most of what he's doing now, he didn't learn in medical school. So what the heck is it? What good is it for him to say I'm an MD when what he's doing for people is much more what I thought is akin to like a shaman or a rabbi or a priest, like holding this sort of spiritual ground. And so I love that you're pushing people to do that deep work, to recognize, like, get rid of these labels that, whether unconsciously or consciously, are restricting you from seeing like who we are.
Athletic training gave me the tool. Like I'm an AMA medical professional. I have a medical license through the Virginia Board of Medicine. So that's, I still at least wanted to tout when you get into what you're allowed to work on, what you're not allowed to work on, I still wanted to be a medical professional in Western medicine here so I could have access to these deeper, bigger conditions that I could hopefully affect. And I've been able to in my career, so it's good.
Yeah. I mean, I see the parallel, right, with for myself in medical school. It's like, I saw going to medical school as being, while it wasn't, I knew from the very beginning the approach I wanted to take was not going to, that wasn't going to define me. I was going to get a lot of really good tools, work with some fascinatingly brilliant people, get exposure to patients and be able to hold space with them and learn. But knowing that nothing there was going to define me, or that I didn't have to take on someone else's, viewpoint on something, and I could think critically. And I mean, that's the power. When anytime someone asks a question to me or brings up like, hey, I'm already interested in this functional sort of integrative space, and I'm thinking about med school, the first thing I tell them is like, you need to know who you are and have a practice to sustain that. I don't care how brilliant you are. If you're going to pursue anything, any kind of training where people are dispensing knowledge, it's not a good or bad thing. They're just going to be providing you their viewpoint, their knowledge. You need to know who you are and know that you are not defined by what that program is or what you're going to be taught, because if you do that, then you're going to lose sense of like your values. Is going to be an incredibly challenging thing. So that's a big sort of ramble just to say, like, so echoing and seeing the parallels. And this is what we need to engender, I think, in our youth. I mean, giving people that freedom to go through and really see that and pursue these programs and not feel like they're pigeonholed or put into a bucket because those are the letters after their name.
Yeah, it's a duality. It's one of those things about, I mentor a lot of students, and there's some things that they'll learn in schools right now that on that's still on their national certification exam, that out on the forefront of the field, we know they're not true anymore. Yeah. And they're like, well, why do I even need to memorize it then? I'm like, you're part of this human evolution of healing people and learning. You have to know where we've come from. Respect the knowledge that we've grown through, even if it doesn't apply anymore. That way you can say, you can't just say, oh, I've heard about that and it's wrong. You have to be able to say why it's wrong. So you still got to put your head down and go through the paces and learn everything that we've done wrong so that you can now respectfully and honorably make it grow. You can't just discredit it. There's a lot of hard work in learning the things we've done wrong.
Yes, that was so beautiful. I mean, maybe that's a segue. There was one other thing I wanted to touch on, but maybe that's a better segue to that question that you also kind of alluded to earlier of like, you make mistakes, right? All of us in this space who are willing to kind of say that, I don't know, we're going to make mistakes, but it's this iterative process to go back. So, I was kind of curious, maybe more practically or very specifically, what have been some of those things that you've learned along the way that maybe you were doing something 5-10 years ago that at the time seemed to be, that was really helping people, but that through this iterative process, you found that maybe weren't so good, wasn't such a good thing to be doing. I know that's kind of a broad question, but want to get your thoughts.
I think it's my nutritional counseling. Like I have a master's degree in athletic training. I was taught CSCF standards of nutrition for athletes and carbohydrate loading. And like, we know that carbohydrate loading is like physiologically impossible. It's actually impossible. And like, I was taught that at a master's level. So was a ton of people. So, I look back on some of my nutritional counseling and I was just like, sorry to those first couple years of people. Like I definitely was wrong, but I was doing what I was taught. But yeah, so that's one of the ones I've really, and I've been experimenting with diet, my entire life. And so I definitely am I'm up to date and in a much better direction with food advice than I used to be, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I certainly say I had to go outside of my formal training to get a sense of really what I need to be telling people too. And
saturated fat is good, right?
Oh, man, it's goodness. Yeah. It's, but you have to learn, like, I love that perspective of you need to know where we came from to know where we need to go. Like, and to respectfully, don't just cynically say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, have grounds to like, speak positively about it. So I love how you're doing that with students, because I know too, I've plenty of like exams that I've taken up to this point. I'm like looking at this question, like I would never give this medicine and this is the most ridiculous, but I know the answer that they want and I'll respectively put that. So I'll get this answer right on this test. But, so it's funny that you mentioned that.
Well, I think other things that have kind of, come through when you look at the manual therapy work is how aggressive to be, how non-aggressive to be. So that's always something that I wouldn't say it's ever something, it's not a mistake that I've made, but it's a continual learning of developing the sense of pressure. And I actually, people will ask sometimes, the more you do this, do you find that you're pushing harder or pushing easier? And I'm like, well, honestly, I push a little harder these days sometimes because I'm very confident about what I need that structure to do. But then in other areas, I might not push as hard because I understand that I don't have to use as much force to get this structure to do what I wanted it to do. So there's almost just been this big expansion of pressure and angle and tool use, which just any good technician would just kind of get better with over time. Yeah. But it's not just I push easier over time, which a lot of people think there's definitely cases where I'm more aggressive than I've ever been because I know exactly what I want that joint to go to or where I want that muscle to be.
Having met Scott in his clinic, experiencing his whole person, an intuitive approach to unlocking healing and performance, I found myself healed, not only by his unique manual therapies, but by his passion and intensity and the depth of his authentic nature. Needing myself to remove judgments and labels about who I was as a healer and a human being, Scott is illuminating a path for us all to remove the mechanical and psychological barriers hindering us from living out our unique and joyful callings. That's a really good point. I know one of the obstetricians who I worked with in residency told me about, they've looked at, studies of sort of novice people when they're delivering babies in terms of the pressure that they're putting on certain aspects and then comparing that over time. And it totally makes sense that iteratively in being with more people and feeling that structure, when you have a confidence about this is what this thing needs to do, like in certain situations, you were like, I didn't need that. It didn't need as much pressure. Or in other situations, like I can do this and know comfortably. I'm not going to like distort something in a negative way. So, I was, really curious. So there's a lot of things wrong. And this is, we're not going to totally go here, but there's a lot of things wrong with our current society. And we're never going to have, even with our altruistic, utopian mindsets of can we heal as many people as possible, we're always going to need someone to guide us, whether it's someone doing, manual manipulation, to provide us nutritional advice, to walk with us through, a family member dying. We're going to need people to walk with us as this, broader healer. I was kind of curious, in your sense, what do you see in our environment now that are really some of the biggest contributors, or I see as really barriers to wellness, that are really causing a lot of the maladies and dysfunctions that you're seeing?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. One of my most popular lectures that I got hired to do is my repetitive stress lecture. And, when you look at, especially where I came from of growing up and I was taught work ethic because I grew up poor. So, you want something, you go work for it. And one of the biggest obstacles that face every one of us, just like you said, is this world and society we live in. We're just now waking up to the whole Kelly Starrett mobility WOD, supple leopard, how to manage your fascia. When you understand, I tell people to think about their fascial tightnesses as their bank account. Every day, if you spent more money than you made, you're going to end up broke. And we all understand that's an easy thing to understand financially.
Yeah.
Okay. Every day, if you shorten and tighten and limit your body more than you make it strong, supple, and stable, you are going to end up broke. It's the same equation. So when you look at an hour drive to work, 6 hours, 8 hours at a desk, and an hour drive back home, there's not enough time left in the day to undo that. You're not going to be able to do that. Then we get caught up in adrenal fatigue and all this sympathetic overload. We're supposed to go into a fight or flight if there's a grizzly bear chasing us down. not because we can't pay our mortgage, or not. It feels like we're having our lives taken away from us, but you're not. So getting caught up in the illusions of this world as if they were truly life or death, and then physically not honoring what it truly takes to maintain health in this physical body. It's really almost a time issue of this society we've created of it takes both parents to work just to maintain a life, and we want to buy that house that we want, and we still got to run the kids everywhere. Learning how to optimize our I get a lot of clients these days that are very injury prevention and optimization based.
Mm-hmm.
And when you learn to manage your life like that, it doesn't look like the life that most of us live.
Yeah.
That's the biggest obstacle. It's not self-discipline inside, because people have the self-discipline to get up and grind into their life every day. Well, if they could rearrange their variables, they could apply the same amount of self-discipline they already have towards maintaining good mental, physical wellness, and just given the tools and the time to do that. So we try to create that space in evolution. We have a culture that we've built where people think like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful example. I just had a patient this morning. She, a few months back, basically decided for me, in order to take care of myself, I only work 4 days a week. And she's like, I could make more money if I worked on Friday. But no, for me, my livelihood, I need space. I need that margin. So she made the decision for herself. And that's exactly like, there's no way you can expect to do some of these things if your life is organized like you just said. But we can't see that, because when you're in it, you can't see that, so sometimes you need somebody outside of it who usually will make you angry because, you're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, how can you expect to, I love that analogy. It's a perfect, very clear analogy. I know other people have told me, and I try to use the concept of like, we tell you to eat sort of this, eat a variety of foods, eat the rainbow of things. Like you also need to move your body in a variety. You put a variety of stresses and loads on it. And when you put it in that terms, it's like, oh, so you mean like me just running every single day on the treadmill doing this is not actually good for me? Oh, who would have thought? But you have to give people that space, and in the amount of time that you're able to, even in one visit, work with someone to bring up some of those things is like you just shattered a world for them, and it's brought a whole new perspective of like what they can do. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're offering for people. And then when they sense that, they're like, oh man, I'm one coming back, and then two, how can I restructure my life so that I'm not sitting back here a month, or a year later with the same problem.
It's why people, at this point, it's very normal for people to fly across the country. I've had people fly in from San Diego, Canada, Florida. I mean, I get people to fly in that work with me for long periods of time. And you look at just how did that happen? Well, it's not just because I'm, doing good massage. The value, the total package of what we offer is life-changing in a very short amount of time. So some simple things for the listeners, if they're listening to all these grandiose things of society and philosophical, simple things is, get an adjustable workstation. And this one's really big. I'm really passionate about this also. They don't make healthy shoes, right? Yeah. So it's, you look at Two River Treads down in Ranson, West Virginia. It's a real good friend of mine, Dr. Mark Cucuzella. He's made one of the first minimalist shoe stores in the entire country. The shoes that we put on our feet, let's take it way back. The shoes that you put on your baby's feet is instantly starting to cripple them as soon as you start doing it, because they're not built for how our body is supposed to move. So there's some simple things is, find some really wide toe box, neutral flat shoes, and maintain as much movement throughout your day as you can from an adjustable workstation. Sit down sometimes. Standing in the same position all day is just as bad for you. It's about what's the best position you can put your body in, the next position. That's the answer to that question, right?
Yeah.
There's some simple take-home points for people listening if they want to start making these changes. When you look at your baby and you've raised a kid and you look at how flexible that their hips are and their feet, and then you look at by the time they're 5, it's usually already gone. By the time that they're 8 and they've spent 3 or 4 years sitting at a desk at school, hip mobility is gone. That should not happen. We should not lose the flexibility and suppleness that we have so soon in our lives.
Yeah.
Restrict movement. That's what we do. 30-minute recesses at lunch. I mean, we got to stop raising kids like that.
Yeah. And we're not consciously in a lot of situations aware of it, right? You put shoes on someone because that's what your mom did, or that's just what you do, right? I know personally for myself, when I kind of came into this ancestral movement like about 5-6 years ago, and I've been sort of wearing barefoot shoes. And it's so funny because I'd be walking around the hospital and I get so many like comments of like, your shoes are really cool. And I'm like, yeah, they're more than just cool. Like, this is probably what you should be wearing too. like I'm not doing this for style. Actually, if anything, I don't think they actually look that cool, quote unquote. That I really, so that's a really good, I would love that practical piece. I've had a standing desk from my first year of med school. Thank God to my parents, beautiful people that gave me this as a gift, and it's what got me through school. And walking to school, putting myself, wearing a backpack over one shoulder, doing, just goofy stuff. And are there other things? You've listed some very practical things, other things that people should be at least starting to think about. Maybe they don't necessarily have total control over that they can do, but what are other things that they can, on a practical level, start to do to realize, like, even if I don't have dysfunction or I don't have a specific pain, what can I do to really optimize my body?
So it's almost if they just kind of follow me down this thought process for a minute. Within the practice of evolution, I really wanted to create and strive to keep creating a injury prevention and optimization clinic, but I can't get out of the rehab business. Now, what that means is I want normal to be the worst that any of my patients and clients ever feel. I want normal to be the worst. And this is simple. It's just like managing money. Like, do you put money in your account every time you overdraft, or do you try to keep about $500 or $1,000 or wherever you're at in life? What do you try to keep in there? Right?
You better keep some money in.
You better keep some money in there. So what people do, because we're all tough and we're all the last priority on our list, is that when the wheels start falling off of it, or when the meniscus is already gone, or when the rotator cuff is already tore, or when they can't take the back pain anymore, then a white flag comes up. Then you go do something about it. Would you manage your finance? If you had a choice, would you manage your finances that way? No. So when we have these little aches and pains that are continually there, go do something about it. That's again why I've formed the practice that I've formed, where I have direct access, cash-based practice, is because one of the things that need to be improved in our system is you can't get help until you're hurt right now.
Yes.
Well, so this whole system is set up as this retroactive stance where we're just going to get you good enough for ADLs, activities of daily living, and then anything else past that is not our concern. I want a normal to be the most minimal and worst that you ever feel. And as soon as you start approaching, man, I can really start to feel now, let's get you pushed back forwards again. It's really the same equation. It's the same thing, but your vitality, quality of life, and total healthcare costs across your lifetime are going to be way less than if you still manage it the other way. So that's one of the biggest things, is take those little aches and pains a little more serious and get ahead of them actually ripping apart. And then you need surgery, or then you have adhesive capsulitis, or now you have diabetes because you haven't been watching your A1C climb, but it wasn't over a number yet, so we didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe there's someone out here who's been listening all along and heard some of the things you just said, and maybe they have some of those little aches and pains, and they're like, well, he gave me a little bit of practical advice. I kind of see where it can go. But what's the next step? Man, this sounds totally, it resonates with me. I need to start, optimizing and addressing these things before I empty my bank account, right? What types of, maybe I should, he's mentioned yoga and meditation and my nutrition, or maybe I should start going to a yoga class, or maybe I should, there's probably a number of things running through their head. What would you say, to someone who fits that sort of, maybe having those thoughts? What would you say, like right now, practically speaking, what will be the next best step? Because obviously, coming to see you is probably going to be a bit of a challenge because you're so full and you're seeing so many people. But what's the next practical step? And this is a generalizing, but what will be some of the next practical steps to do if those are some of the thoughts that you're having and this resonates with you?
One is, so I tell people, if you just look at what your body can do, if anyone listening right now if you put your arm all the way up over your head, so straight as high as it'll go over your head. Now think about what daily activity in life do you do that makes it go there? Like none. Like most of it, and this is where shoulder replacements and all the, hardware that we make for that only go to about, 130 degrees or something, because you just need to get stuff out of a cabinet. So you never put your arm all the way over your head, yet it's supposed to go so what happens now 40 years? You haven't put your arm all the way over your head except a couple times a day if you stretch. So really, we can unpack all this, like, yoga and weightlifting and all these other Pilates. And it's like, just start to honor the simplicity of how your body moves and move it. Put your arms over your head every day. Squat down, kneel down, roll around on the ground. Like, just go move. Walk outside barefoot on the earth. That's an entire other conversation we can get into of ion balancing and, inflammation reduction. And so just start to move and feel and experience your bodies. It just simply, you already know how to do it. Now past that, getting into some sort of regimented practice. Why in this country do we have so many gyms, yet in all the blue zones around the world, there's not many gyms? So the blue zones, for people that don't know, are where people are living to 100 as a normal number, and they do not have near the prevalency of diabetes, cancer, back pain, any of the stuff that we suffer in Western worlds. And they don't have gyms. Why? Because they're just living a simpler life, moving their body as it was meant to be made. They're kneeling down, they're gardening, they're eating from the earth, and they just have this active daily lifestyle that still supports health. They're carrying heavy things from time to time. But when we pack everyone in office buildings and we live this busy life, we have to have very regimented times of an hour a day, I go do this. I would rather people do something 3 or 4 times a day than try to pack it all into an hour at the end of their day.
Yeah.
But, if you're, taking yoga 2 or 3 days a week is great. There's a lot of people, any activity that you can get into. And this is one of those double-edged swords about what we do at Evolution. That's, again, so impactful, is a lot of times, like say a couch to 5K-er. I work with Spartan race contracts. I work with a lot of the Spartan race professionals. People need to get off the couch and go run a Spartan race, and they need to push and they need to grind. But what if that one accomplishment of your first Spartan race, you just destroyed your knee because you didn't learn how to run correctly first?
Yeah.
I'm not telling you not to see. That's why it's such a fragile thing, man. Because I don't want people to be afraid of hurting themselves. They should go move, but they shouldn't get caught up in this success of, I gotta go do this. Who cares if my knee hurts? I'm going to grind through this. Like, don't do that. Like, you're going to live, 80 years, hopefully. If you got to take 6 months and get your movement right first so that you can now go run Spartan races for the next 10 years of your life, take the 6 months to learn how to move and feel your body and get in tune with it, and then go play. So when you look at some of the movement analysis that we do at Evolution, we're one of the only ones in the country that I've found to do it. There is a way, and we have this I've been talking to one of my patients recently. It's I'm still figuring out what I want to do with this, but there's a lot of personal trainers out there. Nothing against personal trainers. Like we have personal trainers at Evo, but they think that how you perform an exercise is a matter of opinion. Okay, so I want everyone to Google the word, if they're a personal trainer, arthrokinematics. Arthrokinematics are the roll and glide mechanisms of joint surfaces, but it doesn't have to be a joint. This is physics. This is biomechanics. So the way that a joint moves and the way that we're supposed to squat, lift, push, and pull are not a matter of opinion. This is science about which angle pinches something, which angle puts something at risk. So we do a ton of stuff with, look, your knees coming in, you're not squatting correctly, your shoulders coming out of position when you do this. And if you keep moving like that, you're going to blow something without a doubt. It's going to go. So that's where our injury prevention comes in. And, it's amazing what we do with people when they come in, when we say, let's take some time, teach you how to move, welcome to your human body. This is what it does. And now let's load you for strength, power, performance, and endurance, but not until we train you how to move first.
It just makes so much sense. But you have to pause at least for a second to be able to see those things, right? I love the description of like, take 6 months, set this foundation, do it right, and then you'll be doing that thing that you want to do right now. I mean, I love the description of the couch to 5K is a perfect example. You just something like, I'm going to run a marathon. It's like, okay, hold the phone before we just like I know I love that you want to move your body, but like, what are we about to do? And I mean, what way are we about to do it? And it just, it makes so much sense.
Just something on that real quick before we move on. It's a tendency of why a lot of people go to the gym for emotional and psychological reasons, but we will rip our bodies apart to calm our mind. And we got to stop doing that.
Yeah. That's another beautiful point. I talked to one of my previous podcasts with a gentleman with sort of a personal training background. And, we were kind of talking about like, why do we walk around and see these people in gyms who are like staring at iPads or, on the treadmill watching the TV. And it's like, they are not engaged at all in what they're doing because maybe they don't want to, maybe because it hurts or someone told them to do it. It's not something that they enjoy doing. If you're going to go in there and do something, you need to be targeted about it. And he was using the term sort of like, training and, workouts. Like for him, a workout was like just throwing his kid up in the air at home. But training was like, I'm going in for a very discrete purpose to move my body in this way so that I can then accomplish this task. But I think, and I love that. It resonated with me as a perspective of, that's the kind of view we need to take with some of these things. It's like, we're not saying that gyms are a bad thing, but like, see them for what they are. And what you say is like, if I'm going to go in and do this, I need to be calculated about it. Let me target. Let me have a clear goal and have some other sort of, objective feedback. It's not my opinion. Oh, your squat looks goofy because I think it looks goofy. No, this is what this is supposed to like. This is the way this joint's supposed to move. And I don't know. I would love to get maybe your thought on just that. Like you use those and just labels once again, that description. But how do we go about entering these spaces? Because okay, we have gyms, and I enjoy working out, and this mentality of ripping my body. Like, well, maybe you can quiet your mind by just quieting your mind by meditating. Maybe that's an alternative. But how can we go about to use these spaces in a more positive and a transformative sense?
Great question, because right now they play a kind of a certain role for people. So we're kind of talking about like baseline right now, but if we get to some of the more experienced people that I work with, we always recommend that they do some sort of heart rate variability tracking, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at the total stress that's going on in your life, and your HRV can be a measure of that, if your job and your marriage and stresses that you have going on are super taxing and weighing on your body, but you're in week 8 of a heavy strength program, there's a variable you can measure, and there's some devices out there. If your HRV is low and you actually go do heavy deadlifts and heavy squats, you're actually detraining yourself. You're just going to the gym and hurting yourself. But guess what? You're still going to get an endorphin release. You're still going to get an adrenaline release. Dopamine and serotonin is coming, and you feel great about it. But you actually just went in and injured yourself today. So, it's really just more of understanding, why do you go to a gym? Why do you go to yoga? And what are you trying to accomplish when you're there? I think at any given point of somebody's training, their biggest deficit should be one of their main focuses. So if I know that I have limited hip mobility or I have limited shoulder stuff, if you don't have accessory work going into your programming for increased shoulder stability or increased hip mobility, and those are your deficits, then you're kind of just going in there and hurting yourself. You're getting your adrenaline, you're getting your endorphins, but you actually just made yourself less healthy. Right. Yeah. I mean, guys, I have ripped my body apart. I have not done this healthy my whole life. It's how I can speak so passionate about helping people, and where a lot of my passion comes from. I've learned this the hard way. I trained traditionally in bis, tris, chest, back on hammer strength machines, tons of reps, wrong thing. We actually look down on people that want to stop because something hurts. Be tough, push through it. And again, there's value to that. There are times when you need to learn how to be tough and push through it, but you better make sure you're pushing through the right kind of pain, and you're pushing when you should push, because a lot of times you should listen. And I think right now, myself included, and a lot of the athletes and people I work with, we're at a phase in our athletic development where we need to listen a little bit more than we need to push.
Yeah.
We figured out how to grind. We got to figure out how to heal.
Wow. I mean, it's a beautiful summary just in those short words. And it's something, once again, we've brought up so many things in this conversation that I think for anybody who's stuck on a hamster wheel, it's going to take something jarring to do that. And sometimes maybe it's that injury and you find the right person. And I don't wish that on anybody. I know part of my own healing was part of, was a major destruction, and my own, loss of health, and then regaining and then seeing things very differently. Whatever it is, we need something to get us off that hamster wheel so we can see a different perspective and realize maybe the way we're doing something is not the right way to do it, or I can be doing it in another way that's maybe more supportive. And I mean, it all boils down to what you've said in all of your pursuits is like, how can I understand the human body, the human psyche, the human experience more, so that when that patient comes into my room, regardless of what they bring, I'm going to be able to sit with them and walk with them with whatever they have. And you've been doing it for so long with so many people. you've built up like an incredible experience. But I mean, that's the essence of what all of us, even if we're not a healer, not even a practitioner of medicine, I mean, we can bring that to our work. We have to have that sort of mentality. Don't be afraid to be wrong, but be willing to be fully present there and alter your perspective when it needs to be changed. I don't know. That was a bit of a ramble in itself, but I wanted to maybe use that a little bit to. I know we're probably going to close here because we've been talking for a little while. Maybe give you one final example. You've kind of spoken more broadly about different things that you've done for people, athletes, but didn't know if you wanted to end this conversation with maybe sharing a very personal story of maybe a patient or individual in your clinic that really illustrates, one, your work, but two, just the broader power of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's almost like it's a daily practice. I mean, you could just come watch every day.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. So a single example of kind of everything that we've talked about, kind of here. I mean, almost my own. Almost my own example of, say like rupturing my Achilles. It really is, when I ruptured my Achilles tendon, it really is what put me on this path of what am I doing wrong? Like I was 28 years old, a pretty elite level athlete, and it just ruptured. Just like, how does that even happen? And that's what put me down the path of, shoe wear and, iStem therapy and biomechanics and learning how my body is supposed to move. And, once you really get into, figuring out why you've hurt yourself or why you keep hurting yourself, it turns into the breadth of conversation that we just had here today. Like it really instantly becomes that, because those are all the variables. That's what it kind of turns into. So yeah, I don't know, man, there's I have a lot of patients that every one of them, they leave seeing how the movement and the exercise is the bigger medicine, honestly. But if there's scar tissue limiting your movement or limiting nutrient delivery, then you're in there. You're just on that hamster wheel. You're actually, that's why a lot of, physical therapy fails, is because they're not doing this piece or this piece in conjunction with this piece. Yeah. That's why a lot of people hurt themselves in the gym, is because the gym is only to go get stronger for them. The gym should be a place you go heal. The gym shouldn't be a place you perform. The gym should be training for the performance of life. That's what the gym should do, is support everything else you're doing. Right. So it's, I don't know. It's hard for me to just have one example. It's all of them. This is the work we do with everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's actually a beautiful answer. And I mean, really, that's the message I think you've been sending throughout this, right? Is it really doesn't matter. Maybe you can't even distill down, right? There's no point to say like, well, this one, particular situation. I mean, that's what you're doing, each and every day, and then articulating your own experience, right? It takes something rather dramatic and traumatic, like, rupturing Achilles, to start to see that, that single event wasn't really what it was about. I know our good friend Ryan Muncie uses the term, the thing was not the thing, or the thing is not the thing, right? We get so stuck on it, like, oh, I moved this way, and that was the thing that caused my back. No, the thing was not the thing. What were the greater, variables playing a role? And we need someone to guide us to see that. I mean, I feel like I've said this before and say it again. I mean, that's what these practices of holism, of healing, are about: seeing that bigger picture, narrowing in on a certain area when that needs to be elucidated, when you need to sort of get into the weeds to explain it, but always keeping that sort of bigger picture and being able to see the variables, see the story that came into play in that room. It wasn't just, you're not just seeing a torn rotator cuff. You're seeing someone who lived a life and did these things or didn't do these things in a manner that led up to that event. And then now we're at this place. And as you sort of said, like, if this thing is stuck in this way, if you're trying to do that exercise, you have a ceiling. There's a minimal amount of ability that you're going to be able to do anything. If you're still eating in this way, sorry, we're not giving you the raw materials. There's no way you're going to be able to heal this in the way that you want. So I don't know. I thought it's, well, in one sense, it wasn't the initial answer. I was, thinking it's a beautiful answer. It's really,
it really is the work we do. It's every single person. It's not like there's some people I do this with and some I don't. It's why I had to make my own practice. Like I build insurance and, we still take, a couple insurances through a chiropractor I work with. If I'm asked by a surgeon or something, like I've taken a couple workers' comp cases this year because 3 other physical therapy places couldn't help the person. It's really been an honor to kind of just what has happened. But I'm sought out for really difficult cases these days. So that means a lot to me. So there's times that I'll take it on and I'll deal with the BS billing and all the notes and all the stuff because there's a human over there and they need some help, right? And I'm, I'm always willing to try to help with that.
And that speaks to your values and just the person that you are, Scott. I mean, it's beautiful. And let people know in these final minutes, you've mentioned, evolution, where you work and your clinic, tell people a little bit about where you're at, how they can follow you and, either themselves or if they have a loved one that they feel like could benefit from your work, how can they connect and work with you?
Yeah, so they can look, the website is evolutionhpr.com. You can, check us out through our website. You can, of course, we're on all the social media platforms. So Evolution, Human Performance and Rehabilitation on social media, Facebook. You can look up Evolution HPR on Instagram. So follow us, click us, give us a like. You can look up our phone numbers on our website and, it's 2018. So you can email us, you can text us, you can social media message us, you can stop by, we're in Winchester, Virginia. So people that may be listening from a long ways away, it's pretty standard for people to fly in and book custom sessions with us. So we're actually putting together some good custom 4, 5, 6 hour sessions with people where you can fly in and we give you an entire day of really optimizing your life. We've been doing that for a few years now, and it's becoming a very, very valuable and impactful product for people. So we're proud to have people from all over the world at this point come in and work with us. And then we just, we have our standard. I got a hip replacement I'm doing right now. I got 2 knee surgeries post-op. So, there's parts of us that look like a regular, so to speak, rehabilitative practice. And then there's those people that are out there saying, help me become that person you guys are talking about. I want to optimize my life. Normal's the worst I want to get. I want to live and be functional till I'm 100. I really, really like working with those people. I love helping people when they're down. I've been there, but I really like this forward kind of thinking that we're trying to work towards.
It's, as you said earlier, we need to be doing proactive medicine, not just waiting for something to break and then deciding you need to have this done. So, Scott, awesome. This has been so wonderful. I already can't wait to sort of have you back and just delve more into all of this. I mean, there's so much that you have such a wealth of knowledge and background, and I can't wait to do this again. But thank you for spending some time with me today.
I enjoy the conversation, man. You got great energy. We can, when you look at all the iStem work and the biomechanical analysis, and we can expand any part of that for people that want to be interested on exactly how the tools work and what is fascia. I wrote an article on the interstitium this year. We've discovered a new organ. If you saw that whole post this year in Science, it's not really a new organ, but that's what they're saying because of, wow, we just fell in this whole thing that we didn't even really know. Well, some of us kind of already knew it worked like that. But we can expand on so many, when you get your feedback from the listeners and stuff, we can expand on any piece of this and other conversations. They can turn into a whole other 45 minutes for sure. I like sharing the knowledge.
Sounds good with me, man. Well, thank you again. This has been awesome, brother.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for your presence and willingness to receive a new narrative, a passionate perspective, and perhaps a deeper sense of connection with our collective purpose. Please share this podcast with any and all that you believe will benefit from its intention to relieve one's doing and engage one's being. Please share your comments about the conversation on our podcast page and leave a review in iTunes so that the voices in this space can spread to all ears ready to receive it. Music credit goes to Dillingham for their song Vessel. Remain open, stay curious, and forever be love.
You walked on fire, and I know you tried.